Hello and welcome to all the men and women of the West. I'm Joe. Here with me is my co-host Dan.
Hello and greetings.
We're continuing the Shadow Kingdom podcast. Last time we left off with just chapter 1 having been read. Now we're covering 2 chapters. At the start, we find Kull in the midst of a feast that Kanu, the Pictish ambassador, is hosting in his honor. It's funny because Kull's quickly growing bored with it, so that he's spending more time studying his host than he is paying any attention to the scantily clad dancing girls and whatnot. Noting things such as how Kanu has become pouchy over the years, and that he's grown soft due to civilization's influence over him. There's an undercurrent of Kull fearing this happening to himself. And in turn, Kanu reveals that he really enjoys his current life. You know, he kind of thinks that young men ought to respect the fact that he wants to enjoy life so much. To which I say, yes, old men should be permitted to enjoy their lives, but only if they have some dignity. So Kanu here, I don't much agree with his philosophy to an extent. Sounds like a bunch of excuses.
Self-indulgence can be often treated like addiction.
Kanu hides beneath this vanity a certain amount of cunning. He has developed political subterfuge as a skill and is probably, alongside Tu, the most politically astute man in the Empire. The dream of Kanu is something laughable, I'll just say, of Atlanteans, Picts, and Volusians coming together in peace as allies, forgetting their old rivalries in order to live together in simple peace and forgetting war. It can never happen. It is so beyond naive and idealistic. It's just so weird. You'd either have to have one of them conquer the other two, which, that overstretched the resources, or, it just could never happen. And Kull himself seems to be a little doubtful and almost even full of scorn for the idea, viewing it as, seriously? That's what you actually want in life and you believe that's inevitable? It could never happen. And it could never happen, realistically.
It's a nice dream, but that's all it is.
I like Kanu, but on the other hand, he's a weird blend of self-indulgent, vain, and idealistic. He is a fascinating character. That said, he ends up asking Kull who's next in line, and apparently it's Kanub, Baron of Blal. Kanu doesn't like Kanub because the man would be merely a figurehead and would ally himself with the snake people and agreed to just be propped up on the throne. But as Kull has no other options, he's the only man Kull. That said, the end of the chapter has an interesting part where the halls of the palace seem to be laughing, speaking scornfully of Kull. And so, where they mock his heritage and that the palaces of Volusia are far older than where he comes from. And you can either imagine it as Kull's insecurities, sure. You can imagine it as Kull being insane, okay. Or you can go with the theory that it is the influence of the snake people kind of whispering into the mind of Kull, or the ghosts of Volusia, which sounds like a really good video game or something. The Ghosts of Volusia. Actually, seriously, we need a Kull the King video game. I like to think that it's the old ghosts of Volusia whispering to Kull, scorning him. That adds a dimension where the other kings, although they were slaughtered by the Serpent people, they still cling to vanity and think themselves better than Kull, when Kull's probably the great king in Volusian history.
All they see is a barbaric brute that wouldn't know how to properly speak, write, and think.
Brull happens to be the one Kull runs into. Brull is funny. He's the same guy Kull was disrespectful to. And Kull kind of has an embarrassing moment where he goes, yeah, so the guy who's I'm going to be fighting side by side with is the same guy I mocked and humiliated in my palace halls. Oopsies!
That's awkward.
Brull, though, teaches Kull the phrase Ka Nama Ka Lajanama, which is a phrase that snake people can't speak, which reveals them for what they are. They then slip past the guards, the Red Slayers, with Kull revealing that all the guards may as well be blind. He's never been caught by them, and this isn't his first time sneaking around the palace. Kull demonstrates the same skill, although the two soon end up bickering over who is following whom. They're both very hot-blooded, hot-tempered young men, so that this kind of competition is only natural. In ancient times, though, it's revealed that the serpents reigned over men, and that the Pictish chief, Lionfang, came to wage war from his islands upon the mainland against the Serpent people. The Serpent people can take up the disguise of human men, such as when one of them disguises himself as Tu before he's killed. Then Kull, in a rage, slaughters all the guards near his chambers, realizing that they are actually Serpent-Men, with this impressing Brull enough so that he kind of starts to respect Cull, as he should. Cull is kind of awesome. And we get, of course, a bunch of references to how bird women, harpies, batmen, flying fiends, man-wolves, and demons and goblins, and serpent-men were all engaged in a series of wars against man for centuries before most of them were wiped out. At the end of this chapter, we're introduced to the first king ghost, or ghost king, in the fame room of kings, and this ghost seems to play a similar role as Hamlet's father, warning of danger and being a haunting spirit who was killed rather unjustly by the Serpent-Men. The king was, not Hamlet's dad. Hamlet's dad was obviously killed by Claudius. The difference is where Claudius is a good monarch, this monarch was not the greatest. But he has to have been at least a little passable and starting to become a little uncooperative with the Serpent-Men for them to have killed him. Because the Serpent-Men do not like having any rivals to their power and their claims to power.
Other than jokes about lizard people,
Chapter 2 does have some elements of horror, but it's almost more a thriller. Whereas Chapter 3 transforms it into full-on horror with the ghosts. If you are slain by Serpent-Men, you become their slaves in the afterlife.
these are two genres to actually really like. I much prefer thriller over horror.
This is one of the best Howard stories out there.
I agree. Howard makes you think, and that's one of the best things.
Yes, and the thing about the Snake Men is that what I wonder is how much influence they have over the common folk of Volusia and whatnot. And part of me is frustrated that the Cull movie never brought in the Serpent-Men. It would have been great to see one of the priestly cast of them show up where they conspired against Cull in the film, and we could have seen them conspiring against Cull and two pulling through for Cull. Of course, that would mean bringing Brull, which I'm still peeved that they didn't.
Yeah, he's awesome.
But on the other hand, we also get here the story of how Brull and Cull became sworn brothers, with the two initially antagonistic towards each other. There's not enough room for both of them. And let us not forget the great quote from the Elephant Tower. Civilized men are rude because they don't have to fear an axe to the face. And I think that Brull was of the opinion that Cull was rude because he had forgotten that moral lesson and he had become soft and weak. But here it's revealed Cull's not soft or weak. And so you have Brull who's quite oppressed enough to finally start to respect Cull. On the other hand, whenever the two go separate ways and then reunite, Brull is keen to use that one phrase. Ka nama ka lajarama.
One thing that I found interesting about Kanu is that brought out the woman and the wine. But part of me found it was probably either a test or a way to try and soften a foreign political official.
He was testing him. And I think Cull did pass that test. So that I wonder if maybe Kanu failed the test in turn. Because he's grown too soft and weak himself from civilized life. And he's also too old. But on the other hand, it shows preference Cull has psychologically. Because Kanu and Brull represent two different sides of what he could be. You know what I mean? Soft and civilized. Or the same hard barbarian, that he was when he first took the crown. So you've got this choice, and Cull chooses to be more like Brull. And I kind of think that the Cull license should be used as a test for anyone who wants to play around with the Conan license. I don't have much more to add. This entire sequence in this story is essentially very psychological, and we have Cull, the king archetype, with his shadows and his doubts, here forced to embrace the role of warrior, with Brull, of course, being the warrior archetype. And Kanu, of course, is the magician. The Serpent-Men, who are the shadow deceivers, basically the shadow to the magician archetype. Of course, we got the play on the fact that serpents and gorillas are inherent arch enemies of each other. So we have this imagery and this psychology that's played out by Howard to brilliant effect. Howard was a brilliant writer. Continue with the next chapter or two. Do feel free to smash that like and that subscribe button as though you were Cull having smashed his enemies to itty bitty pieces.